Guys, I want to introduce a special guest, a longtime friend of mine. He's been in the martial arts for quite a few years. Because you can see he's not. You'll be 31 next year. 26. He trained with Ki Whang Kim, who's one of the seniorest, most senior in Korean instructors in the whole country. You know, Jun Ri actually came to America to teach Taekwondo before him, and I think Ki Whang Kim was Mudokwan was his original style there. And he came, but he was actually higher ranked than Jun Ri. So all the national Korean tournaments that we went to, he was always there. And Henry Cho in New York City, he won Henry Cho's tournament 5 times. And you guys that know how big Henry Cho's tournament is, he won that heavyweight division 5 years in a row. He won all kinds of the other Korean tournaments, and I think a whole bunch of them 5 times in a row. So it wasn't just that All-American in New York City. Not only did he have that, what we call the royalty lineage of Ki Whang Kim's school, because from that school, Mitchell Barbro, who competed against Chuck Norris and Joe Louis and had beaten them before, when he was 16 or 17 years old, they called him Boy Wonder. And he was ranked in the top 10 back in 68 and 69, back when Chuck Norris and Joe Louis were in their heyday. So he was always ranked in the top 5 fighters in the country. And that was not weight class. That was all the fighters in the country. They didn't even have weight classes back then in the ratings. They had light and heavy in most of the tournaments, but they didn't even have 4 or 5 weight classes like they do now. So he had not just them, George Thanos, who was the U.S. Kickboxing champion, and he was a good point fighter too. He had won Henry Cho's a time or two, but his specialty was actually more kickboxing. He had a boxing background too. He did some boxing, but Mike Warren, who a lot of people consider one of the greatest kickers, you know, he kicked with both legs like Superfoot did with one. Even Bill Wallace had him rated as one of the top fighters that he had ever fought. Mike Warren and Albert Cheeks, that was that nucleus of his school that he came from, and he was like that next generation after that. They kind of carried that torch on forward. And the most impressive thing, besides his fighting career, was what he did after that fighting career and what he's accomplished educational-wise. He had a double major from University of Maryland. Then he went to GW, George Washington University in Washington, D.C., got his MBA there. Went from there to George Mason and got his law degree. So besides all the double major at Maryland and an MBA and a law degree, then did you move to Annapolis is how you got hooked up with the Naval Academy? Then he taught here at the Naval Academy for 25 years for all, not for pay, because he loved the martial arts for 25 years. Sal was one of his top students and won a lot of tournaments and stuff when he was here at the academy, but he's been teaching there for 25 years and just retired from that teaching job a couple of years ago. Is your law, you still doing your law? Yeah. Yeah, so he's got a real active law practice. So I don't know if to say much more than how impressed you can have that kind of resume of your martial arts career and your academic career, and then being a successful lawyer, his own practice, not working for a law firm. So let's give a big hand to John.
Thank you. Good evening. Jeff asked me to come and just talk to you a little bit about the Naval Academy, what we did at the Academy, how we did things, why we did them. It might help you in some of the things you do. But before we start, I just want to ask you one question. And if you know the answer, just shout it out. Just shout it out. How much is 2 plus 2?
17.
We have a black belt candidate right here. How much is 2 plus 2? Okay. Convento thinks it's 6. He's filing bankruptcy next week. I asked Stephen Oliver the other day, and he had to get the calculator out. Jeff was going, did he say 2 plus 2 or 2 times 2? Couldn't figure it out, and you all are laughing, but you're paying them. So I don't know what that's about. Anyway, we'll get back to that in a minute, because 2 plus 2 is a very important equation you'll understand in a second. One of the things that we look at in the martial arts is that it's like a 3-legged stool. You need all 3 legs for the stool to stand. One leg is product, one is leadership, and the other one is money mastery. The money mastery I'm not going to talk to you about because I have no idea. I've never run a commercial school. I've never had to run a commercial school. I've never had to train my students as if I were in a commercial school. I was at the Naval Academy. They met the standards or they were out. That's it. So I'm going to leave that to Jeff and the rest of them to teach that to you. Another important part is the leadership. Now, leadership is a difficult thing to define. I saw the flyer that was sent out to all of you, and it said, read this book at the bottom about leadership. And there are books that have been written about leadership for thousands of years. And they tell you about the traits and the characteristics and what you should do and how you should do it and when you should. But let's break it down to the simplest form. Leadership is when you are in a position and you are directing others. But to be in that position, that authoritarian position, they have to give you authority. So the people that you're trying to lead have to give you the authority. You don't take it from them. They give it to you. So do whatever it takes for them to give you the authority, for them to have confidence in you, for them to think that you're going to lead them. Alexander the Great said, I would rather fight an army of lions led by a sheep than an army of sheep led by a lion. Alexander the Great, 2,500 years ago. I'd rather fight an army of sheep led by a lion because they will give him authority and he will lead them. He'll lead them into the depths of hell, and they'll walk in. So you have to do that with your students. You have to get them to give you the authority to be their leader. You can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm the leader. I'm the boss. That's Greek, in case you don't know. That's Greek. Okay.
That means hello, right?
What's that?
That means hello.
Yeah, that means hello. That's right. So that's one of the things that you have to do. And I want to tell you a story about a leader. Everybody looks to find a mentor. I've been lucky enough in my life to have 2. One was my instructor that Master Smith told you about. And he took me at a young age, put me into school, made me stay in school, graduated, did this, did that, and what he was talking about. But there's another man that is a mentor, and let me tell you his story and what type of leader he is and why everybody in his organization follows him. He was in the Korean War, in the Army, and he was just a typical enlisted guy. Worked hard, saved his money, old Greek man. He came home, and he had enough money to buy a bar. So this is in the 50s. He buys the bar, and he's at the bar every day. And there's a fella in the bar, Joe. Joe's in the bar, and he owns 18 vending machines. And every day, while Mr. P is in the bar, the phone rings, and they say, tell Joe the vending machine here is broken. Tell Joe the vending machine there is broken. And Joe's running around fixing these vending machines, and Mr. P says, listen, why don't you teach me how to fix these vending machines? And I'd like to just earn extra money for my family. We're just trying to make ends meet. So Joe teaches him how to do it. He gets up every morning, he fixes the vending machines, he does what he has to do, he saves enough money, he buys the 18 vending machines. So now he gets onto a routine. He gets up at 5 o'clock every morning. He goes out and he stuffs all the vending machines with Coca-Cola, chips, sandwiches that his wife made the night before. At 9 a.m. he comes home, he goes to the bank and makes the deposit, he puts on a coat and tie, and he tries to get more locations for vending machines. At 12 o'clock, noon, he comes home, takes a half-hour nap, he goes to the bar, he works till 12 midnight, his wife comes home, makes sandwiches for the next day, he closes the bar at 12 midnight, goes home and gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Heck of a routine. but anybody that works for him sees what he does. And they're going to invest in him this desire to follow, because look what he's doing. That's the lion leading the lambs. Today, he's got 88,000 vending machines on the street, 9,000 employees, 18 tractor trailers that deliver 350,000 sandwiches a day. And he does $1 billion a year. It's the largest privately held food company in the world. It's the fourth largest if you count the 3 publicly traded food companies. Who wouldn't follow this man? But look what he did to gain their respect. You have to do the same thing. You have to be in there before everybody gets there. You have to be there after everybody leaves. If everybody's kicking with this much energy, you have to kick with this much energy. You have to do what it is you're asking them to do. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. That's a leader, and that's one of the things that you have to understand. The other thing, the other leg is product. I told you it's leadership, money mastery, and product. What's the product that you're selling? You're selling a service, but you have to understand the history of the service so that there's a differentiation between you and Bobby Karate up the street. There has to be a difference, because when people are faced with a choice, why are they going to choose you? Why are they going to choose you? So let's take my lineage. Bodhidharma came across from India, the Himalayan mountains, into China, and went to the Shaolin Temple and taught them karate from India. The Shaolin monks spread it throughout China, and there was a gentleman, an envoy named Kusanku, who learned. Kusanku went to Okinawa, and the form that he taught, Kusanku, or in Korean they call it Kunsangun, is still taught today. But he taught a man named Sakugawa. He was called Karate Sakugawa from Okinawa. Sakugawa taught Matsumura, who was the imperial guard for the king. Matsumura taught a man named Itosu, who thought that it built character and put karate into the public school system in 1904, I think it was. Itosu taught Yabukensu, who was a sergeant in the Okinawan army, and he believed in truculent training, not practice, truculent training. There's a big difference between practice and training. Big difference. And they taught Toyama Kankeng, who believed in patience, and he said that if your hand goes first, withhold your temper. If your temper goes first, withhold your hand. He taught Ki Whang Kim, that was my instructor. My instructor was a captain in the Japanese army during World War II, and he came to this country and taught us. So now we have a philosophical foundation. So when people come in and you say, but karate teaches discipline. Well, how does it teach discipline? Why does it teach it? Karate builds character. Well, how does it build character? What does it do? In this country and most Western countries, you have an activity, soccer, football, baseball, swimming, gymnastics, and then you apply a philosophy to it. And they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Winners never quit, quitters never win, and so forth. In the Orient, there was a philosophical perspective that pervaded the entire area. And out of the philosophy came the martial arts. It's not like there was a physical activity that you applied a philosophy to. There was a philosophy out of which the martial arts grew. The wars in the Orient were not for a year or a decade. They were for centuries at war. The samurai, when they left the house, said, anybody that I see on the street is a possible enemy. Think of that philosophy. When you're at home at night and you're going to sleep, you're sleeping with part of your armor on and your sword right next to you. If you don't come home that night and your wife is there by herself with the children, she would put on male armor and sleep with a sword so that if anybody looked in, they'd think that there was a man there. So think of the philosophical perspective that created the martial arts. Then when you teach this to your students, this is how character is built. What are the elements of character? Honor, duty, intention. What about patience? Deferring present action for increased future action. What about the other aspects that you want to teach these students that you have? How did it develop? Now you've differentiated yourself. Now what you've done is you've given them a reason to come to you. If I put you outside, and I said, here's a VW, a Cadillac, and a Mercedes. Which one would you like to buy? There's going to be different answers based upon what it costs. But if I said they're all the same price, who's not taking the Mercedes? Well, most of the martial arts is probably right in the same range of cost, I would think. Probably right in the same range. So why can't you be the Mercedes? Why can't you be that quality and that level by holding everything to a higher standard? The standard is so important. What I want you to do is answer this question. Do you know the width of home plate? Anybody?
18 inches? 18 inches?
17 inches, close enough. 17 inches. So when you're in junior high school, it's 17 inches. When you're in high school, junior varsity, 17 inches. Varsity, 17 inches. College, 17 inches. The professionals, 17 inches. We don't put a picture up there and Jimmy throws the ball and say, oh, Jimmy, you keep throwing balls. We're going to make it 18 inches for you. We're going to change the standard. Oh, you can't hit 18? How about 18 and a half? We don't change the standard. Jimmy's got to practice. You maintain the standard. You have to hold the standard and never, ever apologize for holding yourself to a higher standard. Never apologize for holding yourself to a higher standard. There are so many times that the standards are reduced just so that we can accommodate somebody. Now, in the military, you've got to meet certain standards because you're going into combat. I'm not talking about for a plastic trophy. My saying at the Naval Academy was, you know, second place is okay. But in your profession, meaning the Naval Academy, second place is for the guy you leave on the battlefield. Who wants second place? Convento, you want second place?
Yes, sir.
What's my others? Being first isn't everything. Being second is what?
Nothing.
Could you hear what she said? Being first isn't everything. Being second is nothing. In that perspective. You have to have that perspective. You have to have that. You know, participation trophies and so forth, I understand. I understand there's a business. I understand, but I'm talking about whether or not you are going to actually train somebody so that when they are called upon to use what you've taught them, they can tell you about it. It's the other guy that can't tell you about it. That's what's important. So never apologize for holding yourself to a higher standard, ever. Now, I asked you what 2 + 2 was, and I'm going to get back to that in a second. I recognize that people talk about how standards change, and things change, and you know, times change, and we have to change with the times, and that's correct. So I'm going to tell you one last story, and I'm going to be finished. My instructor was training me, and what he used to do was I would walk in the door. There was a door right here, and there was a wall. He would sit behind the wall. And I'd walk in, and he had the stick, the bamboo stick. You know about the bamboo sticks. And I'd walk in, and he would beat the dickens out of me. I mean, I'd walk in, and whack, boom, right in the head. I mean, you had to move, block, move, move. He said, anytime, come on. Anytime, are you ready? Anytime, come on. And that's how he trained us. Only a certain group of us, the ones that wouldn't sue him. So what happened? Why do you think I got a law degree? So he's training me. And one day, he beat me so badly. It was, I mean, I had welts on my head. I had a black eye, a little rabbit right here, and my knuckles at home. And I got pissed off. I was upset. So the next day I walk in, and you'd walk in this door, you'd make a U-turn, and you'd walk into the dressing room, and his office was right there, and I used to walk by the office, and I'd say, how do you, sir? And I'd walk in, get dressed, right? This time, I wasn't talking to him. I just like this. I got dressed, I walked out, and he says, Critzos. I said, sir. He says, come here, sit down. So he's on one side of the desk, I'm on the other side of the desk, and I'm just looking straight ahead. I'm not even looking at him. He said, what's the matter? I said, nothing. He says, everything okay? I said, oh, yeah. Great, peachy. Well, why are you upset? I said, I'm not upset. I just want to go train. He says, no, what's the matter? We're going to sit here until you tell. I said, why did you have to look at my eye, look at my head, look at my hand, look at this? I said, what is it? He says, you want to be a champion? I said, yeah. He says, that's training. I said, sir, this is 1970, whatever it was. I said, things change. He said, oh, things change. I said, yeah, things change. I mean, there's training techniques, there's this, there's, philosophical, but then, and he says, oh, let me ask you a question. How much is 2 plus 2? I said, 4. He says, okay. 2,000 years ago, how much was 2 plus 2? And he started laughing, he got up and walked out. Not everything changes. Not everything changes. You have to give 100%, 100% of the time, unless you're giving blood. Thanks for having me today.
Great presentation. Questions for Master Critzos?
Okay, I like
He
that.
won't use the stick, okay? I made him leave him in the car because nothing changed. So anything about his training, anything about his martial arts, how it affected his education goals and law, we know why he got his law degree now. Yes, ma'am.
I want to hear another one of your teacherisms from your master.
Wasn't that a great martial arts history lesson there? Let's give a big hand for that. We got another.
There are so, I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of any offhand. I'll get back to it.
We'll think of that.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, sir.
Sir, in your years training the students at the academies, as you said, nothing really changes. Did anything change?
Nothing. Nothing. We had, well, Sal can
Ask Sal.
talk to you. Did anything change?
No,
Go
sir.
ahead. Tell him.
So I trained under Master Critzos. I was actually I was one of his first students. We started back in 1992. I was very fortunate to be in the original class. And before the Naval Academy karate team, it was just a mix of different martial arts, and all midshipmen would just start their own thing. And then he started it. And the same training that he just described to you, it's literally what I got. and I don't think I ever told him this, but he used like the same stick. And I'll just tell you the quick story. So I told him one time, I said, hey coach, whatever it takes, I want to become a world champion. And he just said, all right, we'll start. I didn't know what to expect. And the following day, he lines up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black belts in order of ascending from the toughest guy is the last guy, and the easiest guy is in the front. And after that, it's like the stick treatment, the stick treatment, the stick treatment. And the same thing happened. The 5th guy hits me, knocks my teeth out. And I didn't tell him this, but I was like, that mother humper. And I was pissed off at him. I really was. Didn't tell him. And then on Monday, same routine. We just kept training, but here's the results. When we went to compete, it was like we sliced through butter. I mean, that was the day I was like, I love that guy. And that's what you get.
Well, that's almost the story. That's almost the story. So we're at the Crab Claw in St. Michael's, Maryland. We had gone over on my boat, and we're sitting there. I know it was you and my son. I think it was it O'Daniel?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and this is 1992. So we're sitting there eating crabs, blah, blah, blah. And we're just chatting, and I said, if you had one wish, what would it be? And He said, I want to be a champion. I said, okay. And I said, how bad you want it? He says, I want it bad. I said, okay. And all of a sudden, I see some tears well up in his eye. And I said, are you afraid? He says, no. I said, come Monday, you will be. Come Monday, you will be. And he says, what do you mean? I said, we'll just have to wait till Monday. And then we started, and I don't think you lost. He was the winningest student at the Naval Academy. We still have the plaque up. Did you go to the dojo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, it's still up there. And it was one of the best. But you want to hear one of my instructors. So my instructor used to, just like your instructor, used to say, oh, secret technique. I'm going to teach you a secret technique. And we'd all go, secret technique. You know, oh, secret technique. What's the secret technique? Because we wanted to do it. You know, I worked as a maitre d' in a nightclub at the front door. Maitre d'. Yeah. And so we learned the secret technique, and I just want to try it on somebody, you know. So anyway, so my instructor says, you know, and you saw this in your class, he said, this is a hand technique. And would you all like to learn the hand technique? Yes, sir. Okay, feet. Everybody, feet. Okay, so you know how to make a fist, correct? Take a fist, left hand straight out, two knuckles. Now, open your hand, 90 degrees, good pseudo, right? Now, 90-degree bend here. Now take this and go like this. You sweat every day. You sweat every day. You sweat before class, you sweat after class, you sweat during class, and you become anything you want to become. You can be anything you want to be. You can have seats. My instructor put that in me, and today, this day, I was in the office this morning. I'll be in the office tomorrow morning. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I go to the office. Mr. P is up every day. He's 92 years old. I'll get to the office, and I'm there early. I'll call him at 5:30, 5:45, and he answers the phone. And I say, sir, I'm just checking on you. He says, you just get to the office? I say, yeah. He says, I'm getting ready to have lunch. Son of a bitch, right? So anyway, so, I mean, he is, he's something else. But if you push yourself, you'd be surprised at who will follow you, and you'll be surprised at who won't follow you. And don't think 2 minutes in advance, a day, a week. Think 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. You can't be myopic in what you're doing. Yes, you're training and you're teaching students right now, and you're doing what you can do, but what are you going to do in 20 years? What do you see? Where do you see? And that's one of the things that my instructor taught me. And so I started, when I started my practice, investing, and today we have buildings, shopping centers, and you know, the income from all that, you know, makes my income from practicing law pale.
By the way, the building right in front of here, he owns. He owns the building right next door.
Yeah, that's one of the original firehouses right there. We just put a bar arcade in there. I think they open up next month. But anyway.
Is that Mr. P's vending machines in there?
No. He's out in the Midwest, actually. But so if you think far in advance where you want to be, what you want to do, how you want to do it, you have to slowly get there, one step at a time. One step at a time. The Greeks say, fasuli me fasuli yamizito sakuli. Bean by bean, we fill the sack. Takes a long, and all of a sudden, it becomes exponential. Bean by bean, we fill the sack. So, little by little, little by little. Any other?
Great. Did you have a question?
I may have missed it, I apologize, but I was wondering what type of law do you practice?
Personal injury litigation. I'm in the courtroom.
Personal injuries, it's okay? So
I told you,
when
Mike.
he hits you with the stick.
I said, there's a future in this.
And I think one of the most valuable things besides this history that he shared with us is that you notice he's talking about his mentors and what they taught him. And you know, what I have found as I've gotten older all through life is that just about everybody that I've know that was successful had a mentor to help make them successful. It's very few people that can just do that all on their own without having a mentor. So that's why it's so critical in here for us to share knowledge with each other. It's so important for you when Master Oliver or myself or Master Moody talk about these things that you need to do. You know, we know the way to get there, but you have to see that vision. You have to think 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead of where you want to be in your school. And if you notice, the one thing that I also was, the next thing, or one of the many things I was impressed with, was his dedication to putting in the effort. It wasn't like the secret, except for this secret, right? It was this secret. And there's nothing different than what we're teaching you. His instructor not only taught him the technique, but if he didn't teach him that other part to make it work, it wouldn't have ever happened. That's why it's not about just technique. We want to teach good technique, but we also have to teach the effort and the dedication. You know, Master Oliver expects you guys to do all this marketing, and whether you do it or your staff does it, or you have to do it online or whatever, but it has to get done. For you to be at a school at a certain time, the school has to have somebody there. If it's not you, it's got to be one of your staff. You've got to put in some effort. You can't have every day as an easy day holiday. And you see, even as long as he's been doing this, as successful as he's been, you know, when I was on the cruise, I was getting texts from him at 5:30 in the morning. And just so happened I had just woken up. Sal and I were getting ready to go work out. Well, maybe at 7 o'clock we were going to work out, or 8 o'clock. But that, you know, I'm going like, man, John gets up early. He's right on top of things. And, you know, don't forget, you know, you can't sleep to noon and expect to be successful. You know, put in the effort. It also becomes so much more rewarding. Make sure that you utilize the opportunity of the mentors around you. And I'm not just talking about Master Moody and Master Oliver, myself, you know, for your martial arts business. I'm talking about other mentors that you can have in your life. You know, it wasn't, you know, Mr. P was not a martial artist, but a great impact on his success in his life. Everybody understand? So look for that mentor, not just in your business, in your martial arts, but also that's going to advise you and give you that support you need. You know, we all need that. And that's what our whole, you know, group is about, is to be able to share. And we always kid, we have almost 150 years of martial arts experience between the three of us, Master Oliver and Master Moody and myself, and I have most of those years. They like to throw back at me, yeah, most of those are yours. But, you know, utilize that experience, you know. Be on the meetings, make sacrifices. If you don't make a meeting, listen to the recording and do the work. Don't expect the success without the work. So I want to thank Master Critzos again for coming. Yes, sir?
I just want to say one other thing. When you go back to your school and your students want that secret technique and you do the thing, here's inevitably what's going to happen. You're going to have people lined up. And you're going to see people go, but you're going to see 2 or 3 that go, pull those close. Pull those close. You will see that. You'll see the eyes roll. You'll see, but then you're going to see 2 or 3. Now you have something important. My instructor, this is back 1973, 4. It's amazing that it's back that far and I'm only 26. But
2 + 2.
it's the new math. But he came to my house, because he loves spaghetti and meatballs. And listen, we're Greek, we know how to cook. I mean, we know how to cook. So my mom made spaghetti and meatballs for my instructor. I was sitting there and he's eating this, and he's going, man, this is good. And my mom said, hey, we're Greek, what do you think? So, you know, when it's all done, she's in the kitchen, I'm in the living room with my instructor. And he said, you know, what do you want to be? So we started talking about the martial arts. He said, what are you doing outside of the studio? And at that time, I was working as a maitre d' in some places downtown. I was running around with him and this and that, blah, 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 doing stuff that I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I would come in that restaurant once in a while.
Right, I used to get you a seat.
Yeah, I would have
Okay.
a meal.
Right. So my instructor said, he looked at me, and this is God's honest truth. He said, so you're not going to college? And I said, no. He said, okay, don't come back to the studio until you're in college. He got up and he walked out. Well, you know my instructor, right? He wasn't. And I said,
He's serious.
he was dead serious. And my mom came back and said, what happened? I said, I don't know. I said, but
He liked the cooking.
I got no idea. Maybe it was the food. What'd you put in there? So the next day I went to the University of Maryland, but it was mid-semester, and you couldn't get into class. But I pre-registered for the following semester. I showed up that night. And he said, Critzos, get out. And I said, no, look, I got the paper right here. And he looked, and he says, if you don't go, come January or whatever it was the next semester, he says, there's going to be a problem. I said, no problem. Made me go back to college and had me bring in the grades. He had to see the grades. And if the grades were good, okay. If they weren't good, I got stick training like you can't believe. Over and over again. But he did that because he cared. He did that because he had a vested interest in me. Why? I don't know. I don't know. We found out after he passed away. His only daughter was an adopted daughter. So he never really had his own son or his own daughter. He had an adopted daughter and loved her very much. But he never had a son, and somehow I got to be that person for him. And
I will say he was the most successful out of all of those, even those champions. They were champions, but they were not champions in life like he was. And he owes it all to that mentor of, Grandmaster Ki Whang Kim. And I was at his funeral services, and it was very emotional, but there was a lot of, he had such a turnout of martial artists and things there.
yeah, it's amazing. So if you have the opportunity to impact somebody, that's your obligation. That's your duty to do that. You have to do that. I told you character had 3 elements: duty, honor, and intention. Duty is an obligation that you assume or that's imposed upon you. You either assume it or it's imposed upon you. Honor is the discharge of that duty even though no one will ever know, even though nobody is looking. And intention comes into play if you've assumed the duty. Why did you assume the duty? To look good in front of somebody else? Or did you do it for altruistic reasons? And then when you discharged the duty, did you discharge it so others could see? Or did you do it because you were doing it because that was your duty? So you have to look at honor, duty, and intention. And that is what you want to put into your students and talk to them about that, because it'll get to them, it'll sink into those few that want to understand, the 2 or 3 that when you give them this and they go, those are the ones that are going to understand, and they will also disseminate it among the students as well.
It's great. And everybody understand that that's what we want you to do. And if you throw that at all your students and you look for those that it really, you see that spark in their eye, just like I saw in Captain Cow back when he was training. You never know the impact some of your words and actions that you have with your students, what an impact that makes on their life. I mean, it can change the course of their life 180 degrees. You can see in his case, just the simple thing about the educational part. If he would never told him to go back to college, he wouldn't be a lawyer now. He wouldn't be as successful as he is now. See, it's up to you guys. you know, you hear us talk about marketing and advertising and all that kind of stuff. But what we have to do is make sure that we're giving the meat of it to our students. Of the, you know, if we're not sincere, you've got to take a personal interest in every student in your school. Get to know them, get to know their family. That's why we find that the schools that have the most, you know, when I was at Miss Amanda's school and I saw the family unity there, and the schools that I've been to, Tim and Stephen, and I see how they all interact, and Sal, and some of the other schools that I've been to, you know, Jason's, and these schools that I see in Colby's, and I see how their staff pull together, and that staff is like a family, and then they treat the students like a family. That's all those intangibles that you can't just fake. You've got to take it as a real, serious, that's what you're there for, is to help these students. And that's why parents should never, when you're like that and you're giving that all, they never complain about the price. It's the few that you didn't reach, or they didn't see or take an interest in that value that you were trying to give them, that will only complain about a price or what's going on. Everybody understand? Yes, sir, Sam?
I just wanna thank Master Critzos. I mean, he basically passed on down what he learned from his instructor, what he learned all the way to me. And I always say this, that at the Naval Academy, you learn so much stuff, but I actually learned the most from him. So he did so much so that he influenced me to buy a couple buildings, and he became my father figure, my mentor, my role model. So that's what we
Just want 10%.
But you see what we're talking about? See, when you have this kind of spirit passed on and sincerity passed on, and then you get it and then you pass it on, well, there's a lot of you that didn't have the mentor that he had when you were coming up. You know, maybe they were teaching you karate, but not all the other, you know, character stuff and success in life. And that's why we, you know, you hear Master Oliver always talking about character development and how our schools have that make our schools so much more valuable. That's why I always use the analogy, you know, I don't know how accurate it is, but I just kind of say our martial arts schools in our group are kind of like the private schools of martial arts schools. So they're worth more because you get more. Why does a parent send their child to a private school? Well, it's not because it was closer to their house, and it's not because they wanted to spend $20,000 extra that year, and they got 12 years of doing that. They do it because of the perception of value. There's no guarantees. But why do they pay all of that? Because of the history of that school and what the students, the graduates of that school, in other words, what the black belts of your school, you know, develop your own testimonials. So you have the successes like Master Critzos, like Captain Cow, those kind of success stories to share with your students as they become successful like that. And that's what creates the real value. And that's why nobody should complain about the price. There'll always be a small part that do. That's why we say 75% of the people will renew or should renew, and 25% don't see the value, don't see the vision, and you probably don't want them in there anyway because they're going to get in there and spoil up the rest of them. Everybody understand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, Master Moody, did you? Thank you. Let's give Mr. Critzos a big hand.